Hello everyone and welcome to this short video. My name is Nicholas Smith. I'm Head of Tax here at Duncan and Topless, and this afternoon with my colleagues I've been watching Jeremy Hunt give his first spring budget. A little bit of background, I suppose, to the budget speech itself. If we go back 12 months, we have seen 3 Prime Ministers and 4 Chancellors in that time, and Jeremy Hunt only became Chancellor in October, November of last year. Gave his autumn statement in November. We've had the mini budget from Kwasi Kwarteng, which was a little bit of a disaster. There was so much market uncertainty as a result, and the cost of borrowing for the government rose dramatically. And if you recall, we had the Bank of England intervention around that time before Jeremy Hunt became Chancellor, and we had the U-turns and created that stability, and Jeremy Hunt certainly referred to that today. Around the same time, we've had the cost of living crisis and inflation peaking at over 11%, although that now is falling, with the economy slipping into a shallow recession. So what did I expect before today? Really, we're no surprise to know some energy support, certainly for households. That actually was announced this morning, that would be extended. The support for domestic energy use, the £2,500 price cap per household would be extended until July. We knew that was coming anyway. And I expected a focus on growth and investment, and yes, we got that to an extent. And the employment for the economically inactive. In terms of the budget speech itself, Jeremy Hunt stood up for over an hour. I was surprised actually how little he said. There was a lot of rhetoric. Interesting points, I suppose, from the Office for Budget Responsibility about the forecast. We are no longer expected to fall into a technical recession next year. I think from memory, the growth was a negative 0.2%, not enough to get into recession. And Jeremy Hunt's focus was very much on those parameters that have previously been set out by the government in terms of halving inflation, reducing debt, and getting the economy going again. In spite of that, the Office for Budget Responsibility still expects debt to peak at 97.3% of GDP in a couple of years' time before starting to fall away. The Chancellor did point out that this is still one of the lowest in the G7, ahead of, for example, countries such as the United States of America, Canada, France. And although there was much play about the annual deficit reducing, there is still an annual deficit for the next 5 years. It doesn't really reduce to until 2028 to 1.7% of GDP, which is still quite high. So where was the focus? Well, the focus was on businesses and investment and people. My disappointment was there wasn't more about corporation tax reform. If you recall, the corporation tax rate is due to rise to 25% in April. That will be happening. I had hoped there might be some adjustment on that. The Chancellor's justification for that was that the focus should be more on investment rather than corporate tax rates per se. So that led to capital allowances. Now you might recall that when Rishi Sunak, who was Chancellor 2 years ago, introduced the 25% tax rate to come in this April, he brought in a super deduction, which was a capital allowance relief for businesses investing in plant and machinery, with a 130% tax relief on any spend. I'd hoped that would have been extended for at least a year or two to support businesses in the corporate tax increase that's coming in next month. That hasn't happened. Instead, his announcement was quite a relatively radical one, in terms of for the next 3 years there would be no limit on the plant and machinery costs that a business can spend. And still get their 100% tax relief. That is only really a deferral of corporate tax receipts. The capital allowances regime would have allowed for that eventually anyway over a period of time. But that will, according to Jeremy Hunt's figures today, provide £6 billion of support each year to businesses. For me, that's disappointing that the focus is very much on larger businesses and doesn't really cover small and medium enterprise businesses, SMEs. SMEs already have 100% relief for on plant machinery up to £1 million a year anyway. And most of those businesses won't spend more than £1 million. So the focus was very much on making the corporate tax scene efficient for businesses from overseas to come here and place and have their businesses based in the UK. Instead, the Chancellor's focus was very much on investment. We had energy investment. We've got something new called the Great British Nuclear. Not quite sure whether it's a body or a bank, but we'll provide support to generate a better nuclear energy system for us, such that by 2050, 25% of our energy will be from nuclear. Quite a move from the existing policies, and it will be interesting to see if they can get the support from the local innovation in terms of smaller nuclear power. There was also a focus on medical innovation, and there was a little bit of support for small and medium-sized enterprises in terms of R&D tax credits increase. I think this will be relatively limited. The focus was on those businesses that spent more than 40% of their total costs on R&D. I'm not sure that many businesses will do that. Finally, the main point about employment and the economically inactive did indeed come up as expected. This is a real focus for the government in terms of those people they'd like to return to the workplace, whether they be the older over 50s, called the older workforce by many. Jeremy Hunt referred to them today as experienced workforce, and even talked about an apprenticeship type scheme called returnerships. There was also focus on parents of young children in terms of childcare for those, to get those back into the workforce, as well as those with disabilities or long-term sickness, and support for those. Overall, how did I feel about today's budget? Well, I think lacking in lots of detail. I'm sure we will see more detail as we look at the press releases over the next day or so, and to that extent, I would welcome you to join our budget summary seminar, which we're holding on Friday morning. That's the 17th of March, and we'll post details for you to join online. So before I finish, I think it's just worth talking about the one major announcement that I think none of us were expecting. We were expecting something on pensions. I'm not sure we're expecting quite what we saw today. Currently, before today's budget announcements, pension reliefs have been restricted to the extent that there is a limit on the annual amount a taxpayer can put into their pension, and there is a lifetime limit as to how much that pot can grow to. Before today, the annual allowance for pensions was £40,000. That was increased by 50% to £60,000 today. The lifetime allowance limit is currently, wait for this, £1,073,000. It's £1 million plus a bit of inflation from a couple of years ago. And Jeremy Hunt started today by saying that he wasn't going to increase that limit. He was in fact going to abolish it, which he's done. That, I suppose, is great for taxpayers who want to continue to contribute to their pension. And it was aimed very much at doctors and higher paid within the NHS, but does apply to all taxpayers, not just the people that work for the NHS. He didn't mention it, but I've noticed, to be fair, one of my colleagues noticed that tax-free lump sum is not being increased in line with the abolition of the lifetime allowance. Currently, most pensions allow for a tax-free lump sum of 25% of the amount saved at retirement. That limit of 25% of the 1,073,000 will not be increased, even if the pension scheme now exceeds that. So there is that limiting factor. But overall, a good finishing point, I think, in terms of what's good for people to stay in employment and maybe get back into employment by encouraging them to put money into their pensions. So on that note, thank you very much for listening. I would encourage you, as I say, to join our webinar. I'm joined with 3 of my tax directors, and they will help me on Friday morning to unravel all the detail that we can then read again this afternoon. Thank you for watching.